Thank you, Babumtian. Greetings. Okay. Let me just follow the protocol. Greetings to the Premier in absentia, the MEC, the Minister, the Honorable Mayors who are in attendance. I'm not sure whether there are MPEC chairpersons here, but greetings to them as well, and the colleagues, officials of the municipalities and different departments. Basically, my presentation is going to be very short, but it's a long subject, but presentation is going to be very short because we are just going to focus on service delivery, the issues on your FWU, especially irregular expenditure, how they affect service delivery. I've got a panel that is going to assist me. Can they just come forward as well? Mr. Zungu, former AG official, he's an audit committee member now. Mr. Mgobhozi from Umngeni, CFO, they just received a clean audit in the province. And Mr. Komo from Umngeni, a former provincial treasury official and expert of the SCM. Okay. Okay, as I have said, UFW, I think we don't really have to unpack the concept. We know it's an acronym standing for Unauthorized, Irregular, Fruitless, and Wasteful Expenditure. The presentation is going to focus more on prevention strategies, how do we address UFW, then we're going to give the Auditor General's perspective in their consolidated audit report of 22-23. Basically, UFW, I know it's a very controversial subject, government as a whole, not just local government. It's something that we are grappling with as the state at all levels of government, because there's a perception that it represents corruption. The public perception, I'll put it like that, and the media perception that it represents corruption, it represents money that was lost, that was intended for service delivery. But AG has got this perspective in its audit reports. They are saying after years of service delivery failures, council administrative instability, financial management, and disregard for the law, this sphere of government faces greater demands than ever before to regain trust of South Africans. This was the MFMA audit. So the sphere of government that is referred to here is local government, which is municipality. Furthermore, a call was made to the new mayors, that was after 2021 election, November, and speakers, council members elected to represent their communities to provide courageous, ethical, and accountable and citizen-centric leadership to overhaul a local government characterized by insufficient accountability, failing service delivery, poor governance, weak institutional capacity, and instability. The Indaba here is about service delivery. I think this is our main focus for the presentation. Then the issue of service delivery planning was cited as one of the weaknesses in the municipalities. Okay, by the way, this is a consolidated report for the entire country, not just KZN. I think it should be understood in that context. Reporting an achievement, failing municipal infrastructure, and increasing pressure on local government finances due to lack of careful spending. Careful spending, we know that results to your FWU. If you don't spend prudently, you'll even incur fruitless and wasteful expenditure, whereby you don't derive value for money on what you are spending. I think we need to also emphasize that. It is a given that wasted money and resources on UFW due to fraud, maladministration, theft, and corruption means reduced funding for service delivery priorities. We know that. If there was a grant that was given to you to build a road, I'm making an example, then you decide to pay salaries. it means the communities are not going to have the bridge or the road that they put in their IDP. That is what. Then AG said, identified 3 main weaknesses, which boil down to inadequate skills and capacity, governance failures, and a culture of no accountability. So those were 3 weaknesses that were flagged by the AG countrywide. Then AG also emphasized that a clean audit is not always an indicator that everything is well. I think that is very important. Sometimes you do get a clean audit when you are lacking with service delivery. I think that needs to be driven home and understood. However, we cannot just water down the importance of getting a clean audit, because it positions a municipality to transparently communicate to communities about whether and when their needs will be met through accurate records. Very important. Record keeping is important. Municipalities who are sitting with disclaimers, it's because they can't provide information during the audit. So record keeping is very important. So then the challenges in the procurement that affect service delivery. MFMA provides that councillors, while they approve the final budget for the municipality, are however prevented from serving on municipal tender committees and interfere with SCM systems. You understand what I'm saying? Councillors, they approve a budget, but they are not allowed to participate in the administration of that budget. It's very important, because that might be construed or concluded as interference. It's not allowed. That is the law. Maybe it's something that we need to discuss in the future, but for now we are discussing the law here. I know when I presented this to MPEC throughout the province, councillors always challenge me. And they say, but why are you not allowing us to have a say in the budget? You say, but as an official, I need to interpret the law. Not interpret, apply the law, actually. It's the courts that interpret the law, to apply the law. So, but I'm sure that such forums are going to empower us to escalate these discussions where we see there's a need to. So a procurement process is the backbone and vehicle through which service delivery initiatives get implemented, as it regulates the behavior of officials involved in the process of spending the approved budget aligned with the IDP priorities and adopted programs. Very important. Whatever you spend in the municipality, it should be reflected in your IDP, or it should be drawn from your IDP. Then there be SDB supported by the budget, all those things. I think we know those processes. Service delivery is not negotiable, which means municipalities are required by the Constitution to ensure that their activities are geared towards providing service within parameters provided by law. We know Section 153 is very clear there. The reason for the existence of municipalities. We are not there to prevent your FW. I always emphasize that as well. There's no councillor that campaigns in the ward and say, if you elect me, I'm going to prevent your FW. When you campaign, you are saying you're going to deliver services. So I always say to councillors, please don't be trapped in between whether there's a UFW here, there's a service delivery. Because once you are trapped there, you find money going back to fiscus, to national treasury, because you have failed to spend. You are fighting over things that are not really impacting on the people. So service delivery is not negotiable. You said that SCM policies, regulation, legislation should not be used as a hindrance to achieve service delivery goals and targets. And we are still saying the misinterpretation of the policies, sometimes they affect the service delivery. We need to understand those things. Issue of panels. There's somebody from Treasury here, I'm sure he's going to expand on that. Issue of panels. How do we properly use panels so that we don't incur irregular expenditure as well? And again, I think we know, I'm assuming that we all know that irregular expenditure is not a synonym for corruption, but it's a non-compliance with legislation. Then while the balancing act needs to be found between compliance with legislation and service delivery, a critical discussion remains elusive to reach an understanding that the preoccupation to avoid irregular expenditure while sacrificing service delivery should not be encouraged. I think I cannot ever emphasize that. This Indaba is about service delivery. Let's not go back to our councils and fight over the issue of policies. Policies, they get workshopped, with everybody from the council to the official, but let's not spend the entire term fighting over a policy, the interpretation of the policy. Service delivery should be driving us. Consequently, a typical government official is liable to facing consequences. I think I've just said that. You'll find money is going back to Treasury because we couldn't spend them. It's very important that we avoid that at all costs. Therefore, it should be understood that in our efforts to cap UFW while fighting against the scourge of corruption, we should not lose sight of the constitutional mandate. I think I've covered this. Maybe the question you should interrogate, is it still reasonable as required by MFMA section 62(1)(d), which simply says the accounting officer needs to put reasonable steps in place to prevent UIFW? Is it still reasonable that the accounting officer is going to develop policies? They're going to be there, the SOPs, standard operating procedures, procurement checklists, they are there, but nobody's using them. Is that reasonable? I think we need to also reflect on that, because you will find that most municipalities, they do have policies, but there's no mechanism to check that they are being applied. I think that's the weakness is. Underutilization of technology. It is my, I think, argument that maybe as local government, we are being overtaken by events. There was 4YR, started many years ago, but the SCM is still manual. The SCM is still a manual process. Aren't we enticing people to be, okay, I don't want to use the word corrupt, to bend the laws if we are saying everything is still manual? SCM is one of the units that is still lacking in terms of taking advantage of the technology. Everything is still a manual process. Very few municipalities that have digitized their SCM. Even the contract management, something that is there with system, financial system, we find that nobody is paying for it. They are using a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet to manage a contract. All those things, I think those are discussions that we need to make, because we deal with billions of rands here. Can you really spend $1 billion using a manual process? I think yesterday I was in another forum where I argued that the reason there was CSD in the procurement, it was because at SARS, people were starting to buy tax clearance certificates, because it was a manual process back then. If you are applying for a tender, you are owing SARS, you would come to an official, you say, I've got 10,000 here, can you print me a certificate? They would do that. So they stopped that now. That's why there's no requirement to submit a certificate now, but it's a CSD process, which is digitized. I think it's something that we need to discuss. Are we really moving with times in the SCM space, which results to your FW? Role of senior management, I think we know the role. Section 62(1)(d), I've already touched on it. That's what it says. I think here, we need to check the sufficiency of our systems. If we say we have policies, are we applying policies? There are municipalities that are able to prevent UFW. They are doing very well. And there are those that it's like there are no policies. But when, as an official, you phone them, they would give you a police. But when you look at the audit report, they are continuing to incur UFW. So those are things that, but you can see it's a violation of the law. Section 62(1)(d). Then can a failure of senior management be to put in place adequate systems to detect that maladministration and non-compliance with legislation be considered as providing an opportunity to officials to commit an offense? I think all those things, we need to also ask those difficult questions so that we get answers. Another challenge to irregular expenditure manifests through appointing contractors that lack capacity. Again, that's one as well, it's a challenge in service delivery. We need to be prudent, we need to be vigilant from the bid committees, from the specs. What specs do we want? How do we evaluate? How do we adjudicate? All those things. Those processes are very important. Then in 2022-23, AG found that collectively, grant funding was not spent for its intended purposes at 16 municipalities countrywide, of which 31% of municipalities had disclaimed opinions. So out of those 16 municipalities, 31% of that, they're sitting with disclaimed audit opinions. A culture of ethics and accountability, lack of consequences for poor performance and transgression hinders a culture of performance, accountability, transparency, institutional integrity. What do we really mean if we speak of culture of ethics? I think this is the slide we are saying, we should just keep developing policies, amending legislation. I think that is the trap we are in. We always believe that we need to develop a new policy when something is not working. We don't go back to the policy and check the effectiveness of implementation. Sometimes we find that we don't need to develop a policy. We just need to check the effectiveness of implementation. We even sometimes see circulars from National Treasury where they just say there's a circular now because supporting a particular regulation. When you look at the circular, you see that, but have we really interrogated the effectiveness of the implementation of the policy? Those are things that we need to do institutionally. If we believe so much in ethics and morals, why do we need police in our communities? I'm asking this because taking people to ethics workshop is not working. You can take them on a monthly basis, like going to church. Those of us who are going to church, every Sunday we are in church, but we still sin. That's the point. So now, at the institution, do you really think by taking somebody to an ethics workshop, you're gonna meet a changed person? Saul turned to Paul. Saul, he was turned to Paul in his way to Damascus. All those, but I'm saying he overlands on ethics workshop. Does it exist? We need to play our role. The legislation provides specific roles that we need to play at all levels, from the council, accounting officer, and everybody. Then the culture in which we come from. You know, this culture of crass materialism that is pervasive in communities. Officials, they come from the communities, where now there's this life of slave queens. To have money. Those are things we need to interrogate as a society. Corruption doesn't just take place in a vacuum. It starts from your house, from your street, before you become an official. Those are things that we need to look at when we look at this thing of overlines of preaching ethics and policies. To me, is not working. Then the AG said in prevention, 67% of municipalities incurred a combined figure of 24 billion in the country. Incurred 24 billion unauthorized expenditure. Then with Fruitless, they incurred 7.4 billion across the country. Then in irregular, they incurred 27.5 billion as well. So these are the reasons. They've detailed the reasons. I'm not going to go to the reasons. Section 36 deviations, I think this one we always need to emphasize. It's not wrong to deviate. It's not wrong to deviate. Especially now we've got floods all over the country. Okay, KZN is the worst affected. But even in other provinces we've got floods. So it means Section 36 has become part of our daily struggles. We need to make sure that we use it correctly, Section 36. It's not prohibited, but it's the abuse of Section 36 that is prohibited. Okay, role of MPEC. Okay, I'm not going to touch on this because I don't think there are councillors here. But the interference and intervention is very important to understand that if you're a councillor, when do you interfere? Oversight is reactive. I think that's what is important. Oversight is reactive. It's not proactive. You don't stop people from doing their work and you claim you are exercising oversight. Like internal audit. Internal audits cannot get involved in the decision making. We know that. They come afterwards to audit what has happened. Then consolidated reports again. AG is saying in most municipalities, MPEC are not functioning. MPEC are still struggling, they are not functioning. Then as Cocta there, the bottom bullet, we've also observed that the MPEC, the reason they are not functioning, they don't get support from the administration and the council. Yesterday I said that in the full council, they were so happy. They clapped hands. I realized that I became their mouthpiece, things that they are scared to say. But that is a reality. Municipalities that have got MPEC that are playing their role, you find that they are dealing with this. We are urging you, please empower MPEC. Then the balances in the country, 23-24, 136.9 billion irregular expenditure that we were sitting with before the last year's audit, 136.9 billion. Unauthorized, 104 billion. Then fruitless and wasteful, 19.7 billion. So you can see the figures there. But I always say this is not corruption. We need to investigate so that we can be able to say this was due to corruption or this was due to negligence or whatever, negligence or people acting in a funny way. Then again, in some sense, investigations is very important. I think this is my last point, Chair. Investigations, even if they are performed, you find that they are not implemented. Their recommendations are not implemented. That is, accounting officer is the one that's supposed to do that. Is the one, I don't want to discuss politics, how that gets frustrated. I know it gets frustrated in some way, somehow. However, as an accounting officer, you've got a duty to implement investigations. UPRECA even says you are committing an offense if you don't report cases to the police. Okay, DC board, and okay, I'm not going to cover this, but I think it's going to be shared with everybody. Presentation is just for you, for your consumption. You can go back and implement where you come from, all this DC board. But in a nutshell, DC board in the MPEC is different. DC board deals with financial misconducts, Section 171 of the MFMA. MPEC deals with Section 32, recovery. If you're an MPEC member, you only focus on investigating recoverability, not misconduct or financial misconduct. That is for the board, DC board, or a forensic investigation. I think we need to draw that distinction. If you're an MPEC member, think of SIU. SIU deals with civil cases. How much should we recover from a person? SIU never takes anybody to jail. If they feel there's something that needs to be investigated further, they refer the matter to the police and the NPA. MPEC, you are like that. ETC board, on the other hand, they look at the misconduct or on the conduct of officials. Very important that we also tease that. Okay, this is just Section 32, Chair. I'm not going to dwell much on this. Then the timing of implementing, I'm a recommendation of the investigation. I think it's important as a last point, Chair. Municipalities, they sit with forensic investigations reports, recommending that certain people must be charged, maybe internally or criminally. They don't implement those reports. What is important to note is that in law, such delay can compromise your case the day you decide to take somebody to court. There are decided cases here, they are quoted, you can read on your own, that have been resolved by the court up until the Constitutional Court. Again, it's very important to adhere to your policy, municipal policy that deals with discipline. Very important. Even in a criminal matter, they look at those things. That if you become aware that money was stolen in 2025, then you decide to act after 2029 election because you have lost elections, you have suddenly lost elections. The courts are not going to entertain that. All the courts are not going to. There's case law, sufficient case law that covers that. Chair, I think this is my last conclusion. The conclusion is just a summary of what I've just spoken about. Thanks, Chair. Okay. Ngicela kuthiwa ngi-introduce abahlonishwa. Mr. Zungu, Amos Zungu, currently is with DUT, former AG, senior manager. He's an expert on your FW. He's writing papers, academic papers now. Then, there in the middle, Mapoloba Mgobhozi was Mngeni. Sazana kudala-ke naye kumasipala ababhedayo naye. But again, manje, finally, he got a clean audit. Ngicela nimklephele. It's coming from a disclaimer, this guy. Now he's got a clean audit. You know, when we are supported as an official, everything is possible. Umsizi Mgobhozi. Then Mr. Khomo Lapa, Sanele Khomo, former provincial treasury official, is an expert in the SCM space. So I believe that their contribution here is going to be fruitful and it's going to be an eye-opener to most of you, and you're going to learn from them. Thank you, Babuntia.
Just 2 minutes from us. 2 minutes. No, thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you, Mgobhozi, for the presentation. I just want to, well, I've got 2 minutes to make these remarks. I hope I will just cover what I thought I can just reflect on this presentation. So firstly, I just want to appreciate the work that is done by departments supporting municipalities in a reduction or prevention of irregular expenditures, but also the work that is done by professional bodies. You mentioned your SECFARO, your SALCA, the AG's office as well. They are playing quite a big role in terms of alerting municipalities about these matters. Program Director, without wasting time, I'm picking a lot of things in this report. Number one, the report is stating that 25% of municipalities, you'll tell me when to stop, right? 25% of municipalities in the 22-23 financial year did not report irregular expenditure. And it says that 44% of municipalities did report, but they reported incorrect or incomplete figures. So now what are the implications? Some of them got qualified because they did not report. But I think what we conclude is that they don't want to report irregular expenditure, because if they are reporting, the big chunk of them, they're reporting incorrect or incomplete, they're misstating. The implication of this further is that if you look at a report, you see a good report in a financial report, you won't see irregular expenditure, but on the ground, because we must link it to service delivery, on the ground you can feel that service providers were not monitored. The work was not done. Payments was made. That's a problem. And I think this report is really telling a big story. But number two, this report talks about 31 million. It says 30.66 million paid to companies that were owned by councillors and officials. It's 5%. It seems small. Remember, it's a recorded amount. I think we must worry about the amount that is not recorded. That's the AG's report. I will tell you the implications of it from what I'm reading from this report. But I want to link now this report with the academic research studies. The findings are saying there is collaboration. Let's use that word. There is collaboration between contractors, officials, councillors. That's what the studies are saying. Now, once you start linking this report and you link with research findings, I think there's a big problem. Because if there's collaboration, there's partners. It's partnerships. So you can ask questions. If you're a partner, can you refuse to pay if the work is not done? You can't, can you? If you're a partner, can you refuse to overpay unauthorized expenditure? You can't. If you're a partner, can you do consequence management? You can't. If there's partnership, there's a lot of questions that we need to ask. But I think at the end, the agenda of transformation, development fades. So service delivery is impacted by those matters. I think lastly, let's now move out of the report, because that's a report, and I thought maybe I can just speak into the report. There's a lot of information in this report. Program Director, there's an issue in local government. Intimidation threats. Intimidation threats, that issue is coming up pervasively. I think we need to reflect on that matter. Because the issue of partnerships, it creates contractors who are untouchables. It creates officials who are not touchables, meaning you can do whatever you please. You're not touchable because of a partnership and collaborations. But threats make it even worse because they come from different sides. Now there's threats coming from internally, outside, but assuming now we are a deployee, let's put it that way. I know that my party will not protect me if I don't do certain things. That's the easy one. You know that you won't be protected if you can't do certain things. You could be recalled. It's a problem. But there's threats that are coming from various other forces, which now lead us to say, can we achieve the agenda of transformation and development and service delivery in those conditions? So I thought I must just bring up these issues. There's a lot more we can talk about, but given the space of time and the information that has been presented, I believe that these can at least give us a picture of the extent of the problem and the work that still need to happen in the local government to get things right when it comes to service delivery, because you can't achieve it. If you've got partnerships, what can you do? You can't do anything. If you've got threats, you could be assassinated. So I think there's quite a lot, but very, the opportunities that are given here to us, we can engage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zungu. Mr. Mgobhozi from Richmond.
Thanks, Program Director, and good afternoon, everyone. I think the message is clear from the presenter. There is correlation between bid rigging, or call it collusive tendering, with poor service delivery. I think that is very clear. But what the presenter also highlighted is the point around the procurement processes being the backbone for initiating service delivery. It's often the case when there are delays in the procurement processes that you would find that projects get either delayed or eventually you would find them overrunning or overspending in terms of their budget. So it then becomes very important that we design controls which avert that situation. I could make an example of how we've dealt with these issues specifically at Richmond. We embarked on a project which I had termed it controls transformation, which was also linked with the idea of implementing a change management within the municipality. I'm one of the people who would say in the finance department particularly, you would have individuals who have the necessary skills, but the problems are caused by an incorrect attitude or an incorrect willingness to actually do what they are supposed to do. And I would imagine also that in the entire province as well, you would find that generally people in the finance department do at least possess some form of qualification. And I'm one of the person who would say if you have a diploma, a degree of some sort, or a post-matric qualification, for me, that's qualification enough to be able to tell between right or wrong. So again, it's an inclusive process where which should be led by either the finance directors, CFOs, rather than the lower level staff. We as CFOs should be leading that process. But to touch on another concept that would also assist when developing these UIFW prevention strategies, we need to look at one concept which I was first introduced to by the AG back in the days. We would analyze the real root causes. Sorry, am I still audible?
Yes.
We would analyze the real root causes by asking at least why 5 times. When I say ask why five times, you would have to ask, why do we have this problem? Whatever answer that you get, you will still need to say, why is it that is the answer? You go back at least 5 times. And in each of the answers that you get, you will then turn them to actionable items in your strategy. If you address all of those things, you would find that ultimately you would have dealt with the problem. I can expand on that concept if time permits at a later stage, but I thought let me share it as an idea. I would allow also my other colleagues to reflect on the presentation.
And we would like to hear from Mr. Komo, just your brief reflections.
Sibonga kakhulu Baba Mthiyane. I think the colleagues have said much on the topic, but you know, one thing that I always wish we could do at a local sphere of government is to try and move into a professional environment. You know, outside during lunch, we're engaging on, you know, the availability of skills. And the argument that one is making is that the skill is there, but it's outside. You know, in the municipality, there's this tendency of pushing away those people who are necessarily qualified just so that you can get someone who you will be able to control. And they don't ask questions. When you say jump, they just say how high, which is, I think, is a very, you know, bad phenomenon at the moment. And it's the one that also is a root cause of of the UIFW. You know, it's quite difficult for a person who is, you know, not qualified accordingly to address the issue of the UIFW, because you have to understand when am I transgressing and when am I transgressing. Now, if you transgress, the first point or the significant point would be to not follow the legislation. And HU is always clear. There is an umbrella act, which is a constitution, and in our space is section 217, which deals with procurement. Your procurement that you concluded, was it fair? Was it equitable? Was it transparent? Was it competitive? Was it cost effective? Every time you run a procurement process and you deem it concluded or you deem it finished, then you must ask these questions. This process, is it fair? Meaning the system that is associated with that process that produced those results, was it fair? If that question is not answered yes, that process will result in irregular expenditure. If the process was not competitive or was not transparent, which is also a system, that process will result in irregular expenditure. If the process was not, there's one element which is highly significant currently in our country, which is equitable, and it's associated with section 2173, which is empowerment. If your process that resulted into that final product, which is the purchase order or a contract, was not equitable, that process will result in irregular expenditure. And you must understand what you are dealing with when you are talking about the equitable. We're talking about the PPPFA provisions, which is where we allocate the specific goals. And how we identify the specific goals is also a process on its own, which is derived from the framework, the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. And in that instant, you also are able to, you know, shoot yourself in the foot if you didn't follow the providing legislation, the regulations and their act. Because allocating specific goals, you know, many of the colleagues and the municipalities have a lot of irregular expenditure because of how they set or how they identify their specific goals. The important key there is that you need to use what is defined in the legislation, and if it's not defined in any legislation, you can't use it. It's a long debate, but you can engage there some other time. So another issue that I wanted to quickly deal with also, as the colleagues need to understand, is that, you know, in the municipality we have municipal SCM regulations. You know, the good thing about them is they are very detailed and they can take you through step by step on how do you need to run your procurement processes or your SCM processes. But you know, the disadvantage of that is a document that is very detailed, you cannot plead ignorance. You cannot say I didn't know, because everything is there. So it's easier to cross the line when you are trying to comply with the municipal SCM regulations, because they are very detailed. It's unlike your, you know, Treasury Regulation 16A, which is a very brief document, and you know there's a lot of gap that is existing, and much of the applications there are required you to, you know, putting in your policies, in your SOPs. So in terms of the SCM regulations, they are a model policy that you have to follow. And it always becomes an issue. That actually becomes an issue if you didn't follow that. So those are the things, colleagues, which I think we actually need to take cognizance of. And the issue of professionalization, part of the research that I conducted last year, I also made those recommendations, and we're engaging with National Treasury constantly. When I was still at Treasury, that we have to professionalize supply chain management. Specifically, I know that there is an appetite to professionalize the whole of government, which is good, but I believe supply chain needs to be a profession. And in the municipal space, we still see a lot of gap because there is a high appetite on considering accountants and accounting as part of supply chain, which is really irrelevant, if you ask me. And you need to deal with supply chain practitioners as supply chain practitioners specifically. And there is a curriculum for that. I think we've worked with DUT in some of the occasions where we try to draw a curriculum that talks to public sector supply chain. And that's where I think all of us in the space, you need to try and rally in that process and make sure that we professionalize the space so that at least we have right people in those offices delivering the right services. Thanks.